Welcome to the deep dive. For generations, the narrative of human civilization, well, it's largely centered on a specific trajectory, right? Often starting with certain regions, certain cultures, laying the groundwork for everything that followed. We've been given this particular arc of history.
A very specific story.
Exactly. From early human origins to, the classical civilizations that supposedly define foundational knowledge and progress. But what if that widely accepted narrative, the one many of us grew up with, what if it isn't just incomplete?
What if it's fundamentally skewed?
Precisely. What if it's been shaped by forces far less objective than we like to imagine? Today, we're taking a really profound deep dive into a monumental work that boldly challenges exactly these long-held, let's say, Eurocentric views.
Cheikh Anta Diop's Civilization or Barbarism, an Authentic Anthropology.
That's the one. An incredible book, translated from French by Yalinga Mimangemi. And the thing is, it's not just offering a new perspective.
No, not at all.
Diop is presenting a meticulously researched, scientifically grounded refutation. He calls them unflinchingly ludicrous and vicious falsifications of history.
Strong words.
Very strong. So our mission today is to unpack Diop's core arguments, really understand the evidence he presents, and explore how his authentic anthropology gives us this radically different lens to view humanity's past.
Particularly Africa's central role.
Undeniably central role, yes. We're going to look at the specific sources Diop used, how he built his compelling, truly transformative case. We want you, our listener, to maybe reconsider what you thought you knew, but the very foundations of human history.
Exactly. And Diop positions his work not merely as, an alternative account, but as an indispensable corrective.
A corrective, I like that.
His aim is to, and I quote, elevate the idea of a Black Egypt to the level of an operational scientific concept, make it an undeniable truth shaping our collective understanding.
So not just a theory, but a scientific fact to work from.
Precisely. And this is absolutely critical because he sees restoring this truth as essential for understanding our collective human story and ultimately for our future.
Right.
As the sources emphasize, Diop's ultimate goal is really about helping us build a planetary civilization instead of sinking down to barbarism.
A planetary civilization, that's a big vision.
It is. And this deep dive hopefully will reveal just how fundamental his revisions are and why understanding them is so crucial for a future that genuinely embraces all of humanity's contributions. It's about building a more accurate and, at the end of the day, a more unified historical record.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting right at the very beginning, humanity's origins. Because Diop's first major challenge is to that commonly accepted origin story itself. And he begins by decisively placing it on the African continent.
Indeed. He firmly asserts what he calls the monogenetic and African origin of humanity.
Monogenetic meaning single origin.
Single origin, yes. This isn't just like a philosophical claim about a shared heritage. He argues all humankind originated from one source, and that source is unequivocally Africa.
And this isn't just speculation.
No, not at all. It's rooted in significant paleontological and biological research, some from his time, some even earlier.
Right. He points directly to the work of Dr. Louis Leakey, doesn't he? A huge figure in paleoanthropology.
A towering figure, yes. Leakey's discoveries really revolutionized our understanding of early human evolution.
And his research placed the birthplace. Where exactly?
Squarely in East Africa's Great Lakes region, specifically around the Omo Valley in Ethiopia.
Okay.
And this research, which is, widely accepted scientifically, indicates that both Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, were born in Africa.
Right. Homo sapiens appearing when?
The earliest Homo sapiens, somewhere between, say, 150,000 to 130,000 years ago. Right there in Africa.
That discovery alone, it fundamentally shifts the starting point for many people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It invites you to reconsider those familiar timelines that might have put key developments elsewhere, maybe Europe or Asia.
It moved the cradle of humanity definitively to Africa.
And to bolster this, Diop brings in a well-established scientific principle, the Glogger Law.
Glogger's Law. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. It's a biological law observed in nature. Basically, it states that warm-blooded animals living in hot, humid climates are, necessarily pigmented. They develop melanin.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
So if humanity was born around the equator in East Africa, a hot, humid climate,
then it follows that early humans were pigmented, black.
According to this law, yes. And Diop argues this isn't just about appearance. It links humanity's origin point directly to its likely initial physical characteristics. It provides a biological basis for his argument about the original human phenotype.
It's a compelling piece of scientific reasoning, underpinning his whole thesis on origins.
It really is.
So, okay, humanity originates in Africa. What happens next, according to Diop? Migration.
Yes, global migration. He describes how the first Black who went out to populate the rest of the world exited Africa.
Through where?
Several key routes over millennia: the Strait of Gibraltar.
Into Europe?
Into Europe, yes. The Isthmus of Suez into Asia, and potentially even through Sicily and southern Italy, spreading across continents in successive waves.
It paints this vivid picture, doesn't it? Africa as the radiating center, the starting point for this huge human journey.
Exactly. A journey that began right there in East Africa.
And this is crucial because it directly challenges what?
It challenges what Diop identifies as this long-standing, often implicit notion of a separate European origin for humankind, or at least a parallel, equally ancient development in Europe.
Right, the idea that maybe Europeans evolved independently?
Precisely. He explicitly refutes concepts like a distinct Homo europaeus, which suggested that separate evolutionary path.
No, instead he argues.
He argues that the earliest inhabitants of Europe were, in fact, what he calls Aurignacian Negroes, or Grimaldi Negroes.
Grimaldi Negroes, okay.
And that they migrated from Africa around 33,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic period.
33,000 years ago. So the earliest human presence in Europe had African roots.
Profound African roots. Not as a later arrival, but as its foundational population.
That's a huge claim. Paradigm shifting, really. What's the evidence he uses for that?
Well, it's fascinating stuff from the European Upper Paleolithic. He points to skeletal findings that he argues suggest Negroid characteristics in these early European populations.
Skeletal findings? Like what?
For instance, look at Figure 8 in the sources. You see images of skulls like the Combe-Capelle man and the Grimaldi man.
Okay.
Diop highlights specific features: broad nasal apertures, certain cranial shapes. Prognathism, which is the protrusion of the jaw features, he argues, align with Negroid traits.
So he's looking at the physical structure of these ancient skulls.
Exactly, and arguing they don't fit the later white European stereotype. This directly challenges that notion of an exclusively white European prehistoric past. It forces a re-examination.
And it's not just bones, is it? He also mentions art.
Yes, beyond skeletal evidence, he points to artistic representations from the same period. Consider the headless Venus of Cyrili, that's Figure 9, or the more famous Venus of Willendorf in Figure 10.
The Venus figurines, right. Iconic images.
Very iconic, but often interpreted in ways that maybe overlook certain details. Diop highlights what he describes as a typically African hairstyle depicted on them.
What kind of hairstyle?
Specifically, he notes the granular or peppercorn-like texture. He presents this not just as artistic style, but as a direct indication of the physical appearance of the people who made and saw these figures.
Suggesting a widespread presence of people with those features in prehistoric Europe.
That's the argument. A powerful visual counter-narrative.
It's like these ancient images are whispering a different story, and you mentioned paintings too.
Yes, not just figurines. He references paintings like the dancing sorcerer of a Vallenskop from southern Africa,
Right.
and a remarkably similar one from the Cave of the Three Brothers in France. Both are shown in Figure 3.
Similar images across continents.
Strikingly similar, yes. He uses these examples of early cave art to support his claims about an early African presence, and maybe even a surprising degree of cultural continuity or shared motifs across these vast distances. The visual similarities are genuinely striking. They make you pause.
Definitely makes you pause. So, if the first Europeans were of African origin, when did racial differentiation happen, according to Diop? When did the white race emerge?
What's truly fascinating here is how Diop argues that this differentiation, including the emergence of what we associate with Cro-Magnon, or the white race, happened later.
Later. How much later?
During the Mesolithic age, roughly 10,000 to 5,000 BCE.
And how did it happen?
He suggests it was influenced by processes like interbreeding with the existing African-derived populations and, crucially, adaptation to colder climates.
Ah, the climate factor.
Right. As populations spread northward, they adapted, losing pigmentation over generations. This challenges the idea that distinct races emerged independently or that Europe was always populated by one group.
So it reframes the whole timeline and process of racial development.
Exactly, placing it firmly within a later period of adaptation and mixing, not as an initial state.
And this systematic reevaluation, it leads Diop to criticize what he calls scientific falsification.
Yes, this is a really critical point in his critique. He doesn't shy away from exposing instances where, he argues, established narratives were actively distorted, sometimes deliberately.
Like Piltdown Man.
The Piltdown Man hoax is his prime example, a textbook case of how scientific inquiry itself can be, well, weaponized.
Remind us about Piltdown Man. It was a fraud, right?
A monumental fraud, yes. Early 20th century. Presented as the definitive missing link between apes and humans, conveniently discovered in England.
Conveniently in England.
It consisted of a human skullcap and an orangutan jawbone, both chemically stained to look ancient and combined to seem plausible.
And why was this done?
Diop highlights how it was designed to distort the timeline of human evolution, suggesting a European, specifically English, origin for human intelligence. It fit certain prevailing nationalistic and racial biases of the time.
And it fooled people for decades.
For over 40 years. It wasn't until the 1950s, Diop notes, that advanced techniques like the X-ray spectrometer confirmed the hoax.
Oh.
By revealing traces of chromium salt used to artificially age the bones. It wasn't just an error, it was a deliberate fabrication, a calculated deception.
A chilling reminder, really.
And for Diop, it's more than just an interesting footnote. He uses it to illustrate his broader critique, that a certain kind of scientific objectivity has, at times, been manipulated.
Or actively used to obscure or falsify African contribution.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder that even in science, interpretations can be shaped by agenda, and authentic anthropology requires a vigilant, critical eye.
Precisely. It underscores the importance of critical thinking, questioning narratives, even from authoritative sources. It reminds you, our listener, that history isn't just neutral facts. It's often a narrative shaped by interpretation, sometimes by agenda.
If we could be misled by such a blatant hoax, discovered only later, what other distortions might still be embedded in our understanding?
It's a question that echoes through Diop's work. Okay, let's move from origins to the birth of civilization itself. Diop makes an equally bold claim about the Black identity of ancient Egyptians and their pivotal role.
This is perhaps his most central, most impactful claim. He posits that ancient Egyptians were fundamentally Black, their civilization originating in the Nile Valley, evolving within an African context.
And he saw this as being actively denied.
Yes. His work is dedicated to counteracting what he calls those ludicrous and vicious falsifications of modern Egyptology that systematically denied or marginalized this Black identity.
Why do they do that?
Often by selectively highlighting non-African influences or reclassifying Egyptians as Hamitic or Mediterranean, anything but truly African.
And for Diop, this wasn't just history, it was identity.
Exactly. Restoring a crucial piece of cultural identity for African peoples worldwide.
And he backs this up with evidence.
Immense evidence. He cites the unanimous testimony of ancient historians, those who had direct contact with ancient Egypt.
Like Herodotus.
Herodotus is the prime example, the Greek father of history. He traveled to Egypt around the 5th century BCE.
And what did Herodotus say?
He repeatedly described Egyptians in clear terms. Dark-skinned people with woolly hair. Unmistakable.
Woolly hair.
Yes. He even noted the Colchians on the Black Sea were clearly Egyptian in origin because they too were dark-skinned and woolly-haired, just like the Egyptians.
So first-hand accounts.
First-hand accounts that Diop argues have been deliberately downplayed, reinterpreted, or ignored in later Eurocentric narratives.
And his goal wasn't just to repeat this testimony.
No, his goal was to make it a conscious historical fact for Africans and the world, and crucially, an operational scientific concept. Meaning, provide such overwhelming scientific, linguistic, historical evidence that the Black identity of Egypt becomes an undeniable foundation for understanding world history. A starting point for research, not a point of endless debate.
And the sources show visual evidence, too, like Figure 16.
Right. Figure 16 depicts the Hebrews in Egypt, with Egyptians clearly shown as dark-skinned, with distinct African features. It reinforces the visual argument he makes using ancient art, iconography, even images related to figures like Ramesses II. It's a holistic case.
Okay, now here's what gets really interesting for me. Diop takes us even further south, beyond Egypt proper, to Nubia.
Yes, ancient Nubia in present-day Sudan. He argues powerfully that the Nubian kingdom actually predated and gave birth to Upper Egypt.
Predated Egypt, so civilization flowed south to north.
That's his argument. Egyptian civilization didn't appear in isolation or just from the north. It developed organically, south to north, with significant cultural and political influence flowing from the older Nubian civilizations upstream.
That turns the usual narrative on its head.
Completely. He cites archaeological discoveries of Nubian monarchy existing before the first Egyptian dynasties, challenging that idea of Egypt as the singular first state.
And he mentions the royal mother essence.
Yes, a crucial aspect of Egyptian kingship. The Queen Mother, the matriarchal lineage, held immense power, often determining succession. Diop argues this derived directly from Nubia and broader Black African tradition.
Suggesting a direct lineage, a cultural foundation in the south.
More than just influence, yes. The very concept of Egyptian kingship rooted in southern African traditions.
And the visual evidence. You mentioned figures.
Figure 29, the development of engraved images on the censer, studied by Bruce Williams, shows striking similarities in symbols connecting Nubian forms to early Egyptian iconography, a clear transfer.
Okay.
And figure 30b, the ancient gate leading into the funerary domain of Zoser, shows architectural elements hinting at this shared heritage influence flowing north.
So it firmly integrates Egypt into a wider African context, not isolated, not primarily Asian or Mediterranean.
Exactly, which leads to the next major point. If Black Egypt was this wellspring, its influence must have spread.
Into the Mediterranean, towards Greece.
Precisely. Diop directly challenges the long-held idea of an independent Greek genesis for civilization, a cornerstone of Western history.
He argues for Egyptian influence on Greece.
Significant foundational influence on Greek thought, philosophy, science, even political institutions.
How so?
He describes how Greek scholars borrowed from Egyptian science and philosophy. He argues figures like Thales, Pythagoras, Plato, they spent years studying in Egypt.
Bringing back Egyptian knowledge.
Profound knowledge. He suggests that what we see as the bedrock of Western thought, physics, math, geometry, has a profound, often unacknowledged debt to these ancient Egyptian traditions.
That shifts the source of Western intellectual heritage significantly.
It does, and this ties into his reinterpretation of the famous myth of Atlantis.
Atlantis, how does that fit in?
He uses the real catastrophic eruption of Santorini, or Thera, around 1420 BC.
The eruption that destroyed the Minoan civilization on Crete.
Exactly. Diop argues the devastation led to migrations influencing Egypt and Mycenaean Greece. But here's the crucial part. He asserts that the so-called Minoan thalassocracy, often depicted as this powerful, independent maritime empire, was actually under the political domination of the Black pharaohs of the 8th dynasty of Egypt.
Minoan Crete was dominated by Egypt.
That's his claim, a powerful assertion of Egyptian dominance and influence in the Asian during a period often seen as purely European.
What's the evidence for that?
Compelling visual evidence. Depictions of Minoans, Cretans, paying tribute to the Black Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III.
Well, where are these depictions found?
In Egyptian tombs. Look at figures 22, 23, 80, and 81 in the sources. Intricate art showing Minoans bringing offerings, bowing to the pharaoh.
Wow.
Diop presents this as direct proof of Egyptian political and cultural supremacy over Minoan Crete. It completely flips the script on Mediterranean power dynamics and the idea of independent Greek development.
And he even mentions language. Writing.
Meticulously traces linguistic connections. He argues the origin of linear A and linear B scripts.
The foundational to early Greek writing.
Can be directly traced back to Egyptian hieroglyphic writing. He even provides a table, figure 28, showing how these ancient scripts derive from Egyptian influences.
So even the tools of communication, literacy in early Greece, had roots in Egypt.
That's the argument. An intellectual lineage redefining the dawn of Western literacy.
This section really invites you, the listener, doesn't it, to reconsider the foundations of Western thought.
It suggests a deeper, often unacknowledged debt to African intellectual and cultural traditions.
It makes you wonder how different our understanding of Western civilization might be if these influences were universally acknowledged, taught as part of a collective story.
Instead of being marginalized or denied, how differently might we see global interconnectedness?
Okay. So we've explored origins in Africa, Black Egypt, its influence. Now let's dig into another core part of Diop's work, his comparison of how African and European societies evolved along fundamentally different paths.
Yes, this is where he moves from historical refutation to a really structural analysis of societal development, identifying distinct modes of production, economic systems.
That fundamentally shaped these two broad cultural spheres, not just surface differences, but deep foundational divergences.
Exactly.
For the African model, particularly Egypt, he emphasizes what he calls the Asiatic mode of production, AMP. What characterizes that?
Collective ownership of land is key. And a central role for large-scale hydraulic works, state-managed irrigation, crucial in the Nile Valley.
So the state controlled the land and the water.
Pretty much. The state, personified by the pharaoh, owned the land, controlled agricultural labor. This required a highly centralized bureaucracy.
And the key consequence of this system was?
A general lack of profound private property and therefore a lack of the intense class struggle seen in the West.
No private land means less to fight over between classes.
Broadly, yes. Because resources were largely communally or state-owned, the contradictions fueling class conflict were absent or mitigated. Diop argues this made the AMP state a monolingual national state, quasi-permanent and inherently stable.
Stable like Egypt's nearly 3,000 years without major internal revolutions.
That's his prime evidence, that remarkable stability and longevity, almost unparalleled.
Now, you mentioned there's a potentially contradictory sentence in the sources about AMP states being non-viable.
Yes, it's important to note that. One sentence refers to them as non-viable and disappearing quickly. It seems at odds with the main argument about Egypt's stability.
How would we reconcile that?
Well, the overwhelming thrust of Diop's argument, especially using Egypt, points to stability. Perhaps that comment refers to other attempts at AMP outside Egypt that failed. Or maybe short-lived dynastic shifts that didn't change the fundamental structure.
So the core message about Egypt remains stability derived from the AMP.
That seems to be the main takeaway. The AMP, as perfected in Egypt, was a source of enduring stability.
Okay, now contrast that with the European model.
Stark contrast. Diop describes the European model moving through stages: slave, feudal, capitalist systems,
Pounded on.
fundamentally founded on private property and a mercantile monetary economy right from the start.
And the consequence of that.
He argues it created a fundamental contradiction between the productive forces and relations of production. As technology advanced, the social and economic structures strained.
Leading to.
Intense class stratification and intense social struggles. Landowners versus serfs, aristocrats versus merchants, capitalists versus laborers. Constant conflict.
You see that throughout European history. Greek city-states, Roman civil wars, peasant revolts, modern revolutions.
Exactly. Marked by continuous revolutions and social upheavals as factions vied for power and control over private property. Conquest and military dominance were central, often driven by acquiring resources and land.
It's a powerful structural explanation for the differences in stability and social organization, beyond just governance down to the economic bedrock.
Absolutely. And beyond economics, Diop highlights profound differences in kinship systems and worldviews, too.
Contrasting African and European societies again.
Yes, focusing on the Egyptian tradition within the broader African context versus European or Indo-Aryan societies, he characterizes African societies as primarily matrilineal and matriarchal.
Matrilineal meaning descent through the mother.
Right. In this structure, the wife often retains independent status.
Yeah.
The husband might not have inherent rights over her or the children. Kinship traced through the mother.
And property.
Often, collective and indivisible passed through the maternal line, reinforcing community ties over individual accumulation, a different kind of social cohesion.
And philosophically, worldview.
Characterized by what Diop calls an optimistic cosmogony. No concept of original sin, no inherent evil in humanity.
Interesting. Where does evil come from then?
Generally attributed to men, seen as a deviation, a specific act, like Seth murdering Osiris in the myth. Society, under this view, is often described as pacifistic, valuing harmony.
But didn't some African societies become patriarchal?
Yes, he notes transitions occurred, but sees them as exceptions or later developments. The fundamental royal mother essence in Egypt still pointed back to those deeper Nubian African traditions.
Okay, now compare that to the European model.
Fundamentally patrilineal and patriarchal. The wife often considered the property of the husband, historically sometimes even sellable, less autonomy,
And property.
strictly private and individual. Inheritance through the male line core to their individualistic economies.
And the worldview.
Described as pessimistic, often including original sin, humanity born flawed. And significantly, evil is often attributed to women.
like ease and the forbidden fruit.
The classic example. This type of society, he argues, tends to be more militaristic, characterized by conquest, competition, a more aggressive posture.
Now, it's really important to clarify something here, isn't it? Diop explicitly states these differences are not based on race.
Absolutely crucial clarification. He states clearly these contrasting systems are not based on racial factors.
Yeah.
It's about cultural evolution, environment, historical pressures over millennia, not biology.
But these distinctions still profoundly influence morality, social roles, gender dynamics, overall development. It's a deep dive into underlying cultural identities.
Exactly, how deeply ingrained these patterns become.
Finally, let's touch on political structure and stability again.
Right. In the African model, Egypt, again, you see that highly centralized divine monarchy, absolute power in the pharaoh, but tied conceptually to divine will, cosmic order, the realm's well-being.
Not just personal ambition.
Conceptually, no. And this structure, combined with the AMP, led to those long periods of stability. Rulers focused on infrastructure, cultural projects, a striking lack of the constant revolutions seen in Europe.
And the European model, like the Greek city-states.
Dynamic, yes, but far more prone to internal strife. Shifts from monarchy to aristocracy to democracy, often accompanied by violence, civil wars, driven by economic inequality, private property disputes, class divisions.
Conquest and military dominance played a huge role.
A defining role, leading to a history Diop characterizes as comparatively turbulent.
That difference in stability is profound, isn't it?
It is. Imagine a society maintaining structure, identity, monumental undertakings for millennia, like Egypt. That's an enormous advantage for innovation, building, sustaining itself.
Dedicating resources to long-term projects. Intellectual pursuits, not constant internal battles.
It speaks volumes about the different paths humanity took, what different kinds of progress were prioritized.
We've covered so much ground. Origins in Africa, Black Egypt, its influence, these divergent societal models. Let's bring it all together now. Diop's overarching imperative, the critical importance of cultural identity.
Yes, for individual nations and for the future of what he calls that planetary civilization.
This feels like the real driving force behind his work.
It absolutely is. The dedication of the book, remember, to Alion Diop, who died on the battlefield of African culture. It underscores the personal cultural stakes.
So cultural identity isn't secondary for him.
Not at all. It's a fundamental driving force for internal development and for contributing to that broader, inclusive planetary civilization. Without it, a society can't fully flourish or contribute its unique insights.
He connects this to the future of African peoples.
Strongly. He argues that a rediscovered or reinforced cultural identity is vital for African peoples to stand confidently at the threshold of the post-industrial era.
So understanding the past is essential for future advancement.
Indispensable. Building a future on a solid foundation of truth, not historical distortions. It's about self-determination, robust global engagement.
Which brings us back to the core purpose, countering those ludicrous and vicious falsifications.
Exactly. By providing this authentic anthropology, restoring a new concept of African history, Diop aims to empower African people to better understand their history and destiny.
A deeper understanding strengthens societal development.
Allows for the full realization of potential, individual and collective, enabling a flourishing previously hindered by historical obfuscation.
It's self-knowledge as a foundation for strength. But not just for Africa.
Not just for Africa, for the whole human family. This isn't presented as isolated or nationalist. Quite the opposite. The sources quote his vision directly. African optimism inclines us to wish that all nations would join hands in order to build a planetary civilization instead of sinking down to barbarism.
That's a remarkably hopeful, inclusive vision.
It's the grand vision, the ultimate why behind his work. By correcting distortions showing African origins and influence, he argues acknowledging these diverse contributions is crucial for that truly inclusive, equitable, planetary civilization.
Because a civilization that denies or distorts contributions can't be truly planetary.
It remains incomplete, unjust, vulnerable to the very barbarism's division, prejudice it seeks to avoid.
So the emphasis on authentic anthropology, true scientific history,
reflects a belief that only through an accurate understanding of our collective past, informed by all distinct cultural identities, can humanity move forward together. Otherwise, we risk regressing, driven by historical misunderstandings.
A powerful and deeply relevant message, even today.
It's really a call for intellectual honesty. Why should you, our listener, care about ancient history being recentered? Because understanding the true, diverse roots of human achievement can foster a more inclusive, cooperative future. It pushes back against division.
It opens up possibilities when we understand our shared deep history.
Precisely.
And there you have it. A truly profound journey into Cheek Anta Diop's civilization or barbarism. We've unpacked his striking arguments: Africa as the cradle of humanity, ancient Egypt as a black civilization influencing the West, and the distinct African and European societal models.
The aha moments are numerous, aren't they? The scientific evidence for African origins, the historical and artistic evidence for Black Egypt, the structural analysis of societies. Diop offers an entirely new framework.
He urges us to look beyond simplistic narrative.
Absolutely.
What stands out most powerfully for me is how history isn't just dusty facts.
Yeah.
It's a living narrative shaping our present and future. Diop challenges us to examine the stories we've inherited, consider how much more complex the human story is.
When we open ourselves to different, rigorously researched, often suppressed perspectives,
Exactly.
and that leads to a truly provocative thought for you to carry forward after this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
If acknowledging the rich, diverse, foundational contributions of all peoples is the prerequisite for building that truly advanced planetary civilization, then what hidden barbarisms might we still be clinging to if we continue to ignore or distort historical truth? What kind of future are we limiting? What kind of planetary civilization are we hindering by not fully embracing the entirety of our human story in all its truth and diversity?
Something to truly mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into history, identity, and the very foundations of human civilization.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep digging deeper into the fascinating layers of knowledge that surround us.